Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. Today we'll be in Genesis chapter 48, verse 1, through chapter 49, verse 33. After these things, Joseph was told, "Your father is weakening." So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has just come to you," Israel regained strength and sat up on his bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "The sovereign God appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. He said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful and will multiply you. I will make you into a group of nations, and I will give this land to your descendants as an everlasting possession.' Now, as for your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, they will be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are. Any children that you father after them will be yours. They will be listed under the names of their brothers in their inheritance. But as for me, when I was returning from Paddan, Rachel died, to my sorrow, in the land of Canaan. It happened along the way, some distance from Ephrath. So I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he asked, 'Who are these?' Joseph said to his father, 'These are the sons God has given me in this place.' His father said, 'Bring them to me, so I may bless them.' Now Israel's eyes were failing because of his age. He was not able to see well. So Joseph brought his sons near to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, 'I never expected to see you again, but now God has allowed me to see your children too.' So Joseph moved them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. Joseph positioned them. He put Ephraim on his right hand across from Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left hand across from Israel's right hand. Then Joseph brought them closer to his father. Israel stretched out his right hand and placed it on Ephraim's head, although he was the younger. Crossing his hands, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, for Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, 'May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has protected me from all harm, bless these boys. May my name be named in them, in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. May they grow into a multitude on the earth.' When Joseph saw that his father placed his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him. So he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, 'Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head.' But his father refused and said, 'I know, my son. I know he too will become a nation, and he too will become great. In spite of this, his younger brother will be even greater, and his descendants will become a multitude of nations.' So he blessed them that day, saying, 'By you will Israel bless,' saying, 'May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh.' So he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, 'I am about to die, but God will be with you, and will bring you back to the land of your fathers. As one who is above your brothers, I give to you the mountain slope, which I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow.' Jacob called for his sons and said, 'Gather together, so I can tell you what will happen to you in the future. Assemble and listen, you sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, outstanding in dignity, outstanding in power. You are destructive like water, and will not excel. For you got on your father's bed, and then you defiled it. He got on my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their knives. O my soul, do not come into their council. Do not be united to their assembly. My heart, for do not be united to their assembly, my heart. For in their anger they have killed men, and for pleasure they have hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their fury, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and scatter them in Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hands will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down before you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He crouches and lies down like a lion, like a lioness who will rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs. The nations will obey him. binding his foal to the vine, and his colt to the choicest vine. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be dark from wine, and his teeth white from milk. Zebulun will live by the haven of the sea, and become a haven for ships. His borders will extend to Sidon. Issachar is a strong-boned donkey lying down between two saddlebags. When he sees a good resting place, in the pleasant land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and become a slave laborer. Dan will judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. May Dan be a snake beside the road, a viper by the path, that bites the heels of the horse, so that its rider falls backward. I wait for your deliverance, O Lord. Gad will be raided by marauding bands, but he will attack them at their heels. Asher's food will be rich, and he will provide delicacies to royalty. Naphtali is a free-running doe. He speaks delightful words. Joseph is a fruitful bough near a spring whose branches climb over the wall. The archers will attack him. They will shoot at him and oppose him. But his bow will remain steady, and his hands will be skillful, because of the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of the God of your father, who will help you, because of the sovereign God, who will bless you with blessings from the sky above, blessings from the deep that lies below, and blessings of the breasts and womb. The blessings of your father are greater than the blessings of the eternal mountains, or the desirable things of the age-old hills. They will be on the head of Joseph, and on the brow of the prince of his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and in the evening dividing the plunder. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them. And when he blessed them, he gave each of them an appropriate blessing. Then he instructed them, I am about to go to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. It is the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought for a burial plot from Ephron the Hittite. There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah, and there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were acquired from the sons of Heth. When Jacob finished giving these instructions to his sons, he pulled his feet up onto the bed and breathed his last breath, and went to his people. So, Jacob's approaching his last day, and he calls in his son Joseph, and he brought his sons Ephraim and Manasseh to his father Jacob, that is Israel, and he delivers a blessing to each of them. And rather than putting his right hand on the elder son and his left hand on the younger son, he crosses his hands and puts his right hand on the younger son and his left hand on the older son, thereby symbolically conferring greater blessing on the younger son rather than the older. One of the things that's interesting to me, and it's not so much in this passage, but earlier when we were talking about messianic parallels here, I highlighted Joseph's dreams as a prediction that seemed to parallel the New Testament, that is the Messiah. And I was talking a bit with Anthony Rogers concerning that, and he said that there was this idea present of Messiah coming, who would be Messiah ben Joseph, that is, a Messiah who was a son of Joseph, essentially. But it's interesting that when you get to the gospel accounts, who do you have as a dreamer in these New Testament accounts, but Joseph there, who is warned by a dream to flee to Egypt, who's just repeatedly mentioned as a dreamer. And you have there as well other parallels of the story present in Genesis, like how the Herod is serving as almost the role of Pharaoh, where he's trying to slay the Israelites, slay the children there. And like how Moses is saved from that by being put into the Nile of Egypt in a basket. But you have also kind of this turnaround where the Magi, who are previously serving Pharaoh in the Genesis, or I guess Exodus account at that point, are instead serving the Messiah this time, serving to illustrate that he's coming, and are enemies of the Pharaoh figure there. So I just thought it was a neat connection. So yeah, for me it further reinforces that the message of the Bible is one, and not only does the new refer back to the old, but the old refers forward to the new. See what Guzik has to say. So Jacob accepts the children of Joseph as his sons. Just as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Reuben and Simeon were the first and second born of Israel. Jacob received the two sons of Joseph as adopted into the family at the highest level, as if they were his own first and second born. And as is stated in the next chapter, Reuben and Simeon acted poorly previously to their father. Like Reuben slept with his father's concubine, I guess. And Simeon, along with Levi, were the ones who slew the population of an entire city for their sister. Jacob's adoption of Manasseh and Ephraim explains why there are 12 tribes often listed in different combinations. Because of this adoption, there were actually 13 sons of Israel. The 12 were born, but Joseph was divided into 2 tribes. Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan. With lingering grief, Israel remembered the tragic death of his beloved wife, Rachel, at the birth of their son Benjamin. Yeah. Jacob seemed like a man who was haunted by loss. The loss of his son Joseph and the loss of his wife Rachel. And he blessed Joseph. In blessing Joseph's sons, it could be rightly said that Israel blessed Joseph. Israel gave the same blessing to both sons, but the son of the right hand received a greater proportion of blessing. This was fulfilled in Israel's history. Both tribes were blessed, but Ephraim was greater as a tribe, even to the point where the name Ephraim was used to refer to the whole northern nation of Israel in the book of Isaiah. The God who has fed me all my life long to this day. Jacob's testimony was a testimony of grace, not personal merit. He did not say how faithful he was to God, but how faithful God was to him. The phrase, the God who has fed me, is literally the God who has shepherded me. This is the first mention in the Bible of a God as a shepherd to his people. This one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. As the two sons of Joseph stood before Israel, the older was before Israel's right hand, and the younger was before Israel's left hand. Joseph positioned them intentionally so that the older could receive the right-hand blessing according to custom. Yet Israel deliberately crossed his hands and put his right hand on Ephraim's head and the left hand on Manasseh's head. Ephraim was not the firstborn, but God chose him to take the position of firstborn. Jeremiah 31:9 describes this, "For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn." This shows how the idea of firstborn in the Bible is often a position of preeminence, not necessarily meaning first out of the womb. David had the position of firstborn even though he was the youngest son. Jesus has the preeminent position of firstborn, though this does not mean Jesus was literally the firstborn creature of God, because Jesus was not created. God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. This completed a wonderful work regarding Jacob's recognition of God's presence in his life. I am with you. God gives the young believer every possible assurance of his presence and grace. I will be with you, in Genesis 31. God expects the growing believer to trust he will be with him, even when he only has the promise of his presence. God has been with me. God, in Genesis 31:5. God gives a glorious testimony to the mature believer, able to say how God has been with him, even when he hasn't felt his presence in the way he wished. And God will be with you, Genesis 48:21. God gives the mature believer the opportunity to encourage others with the promise of God's presence. Yeah, Joseph has a picture of Jesus. I've got a list of a bunch of different things where Joseph pictures Jesus here. Joseph was a shepherd. He was loved by, well, where you have both Joseph and Jesus paralleled here. They were both a shepherd, loved by his father, sent unto his brethren, hated by his brothers, prophesied his coming glory, rejected by his brothers, endured unjust punishment from his brothers, sentenced to the pit, condemned to the pit, though a leader knew he should go free, sold for pieces of silver, handed over to the Gentiles, regarded as dead, but raised out of the pit, went to Egypt, made a servant. He was made a servant, tempted severely, but did not sin, falsely accused, made no defense, cast into prison and numbered with sinners and criminals, endured unjust punishment from Gentiles, associated with two other criminals. One was pardoned, and one was not. It's an interesting one. Showed compassion, brought a message of deliverance in prison, wanted to be remembered, shown to have divine wisdom, recognized as having the Spirit of God, betrayed by friends, glorified after his humility, honored among Gentiles while still despised or forgotten by his brethren, given a Gentile bride, was 30 years old when he began his life's work, blessed the world with bread, became the only source of bread for the world. The world was instructed to go to him and do whatever he said to do, was given the name, God speaks and he lives. His brethren were driven out of their own land. In his second appearing, he did not first go to his brothers, they came to him. He knew his brethren, even while unknown and unrecognized by them. He blessed his brethren without their knowledge. He wanted all of his brethren to come to him. There was a significant time gap between his initial relationship with his brothers and his second relationship to his brothers. He gave his brothers a way of deliverance through substitution. His second coming to his brothers had two appearances. He made himself known to his brethren at his second appearing to them. He was revealed as a man of compassion. His brothers repented of rejecting him with great amazement and tears. He allowed no fellowship. as in eating together, until his brothers repented, and he revealed himself. His brethren went forth to proclaim his glory. He made provision for his brethren. He prepared a place for his brethren, and he received them into it. He brought Jews and Gentiles together in the land. Yeah. That's a good point. Adam was the first born technically, and Jesus was the second Adam. So in a funny kind of way, Jesus is the favored younger brother. Yeah, he's given preeminence between the two. So moving on to Genesis 49 here. Though I'm running out of time. What shall befall you in the last days? Some of what follows are not so much blessings as they are prophecies regarding what God will do with these tribes in the future. Yeah. And just coming out of two separate conferences here, but mostly the Ohio conference, where there was talk about the Black Hebrew Israelites, which is this cult that claims they're the true Jews because of their ethnicity, essentially. They take for themselves the passage here in Genesis 49 and apply it to themselves. Claiming that you have these African groups prophesied here with very loose connections and games with words. And it follows on the heels of a British cult that essentially did the same thing, claiming things like, Anglican sounds like angel, so, the Anglicans are sons of Jacob. Stupid stuff like that. But these prophecies concerning the sons of Jacob are fulfilled more during the history of Israel rather than the games of cults. Reuben, unstable as water, you shall not excel. Because of Reuben's instability, the birthright was divided. Usually the firstborn was the spiritual and social leader of the clan, but among the sons of Israel, the rights of blessing, priesthood, and ruling authority were divided among brothers rather than being centralized in one. You shall not excel. The tribe of Reuben never did excel. No prophet, no judge, or no king that we know of came from the tribe of Reuben. Reuben is an example of how the first can be last. Simeon and Levi were both instruments of cruelty. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. Their anger was sin because it was rooted in self-will. In their self-will, they hamstrung an ox. Yeah, hamstringing a beast of burden, not a beast of war, for one. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. The prophecy of dividing and scattering turned out to be a curse for Simeon. The tribe of Simeon was the weakest numerically of the 12 and shared an allotment of land with Judah. The prophecy of dividing and scattering became a blessing for Levi. Because of the faithfulness of the tribe during the rebellion of the golden calf, it was scattered as a blessing throughout the whole nation of Israel. They received no large tract of land, for the Lord was their inheritance, not land. So both Simeon and Levi were scattered, but one is a blessing and the other is a curse. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Judah wasn't a completely exemplary character. He suggested a profit motive in getting rid of Joseph. He did not deal faithfully with his daughter-in-law Tamar, and he had sex with her as a prostitute. But he showed good character when he interceded and offered himself as a substitute for Benjamin before Joseph. Overall, this blessing is an example of the richness of God's grace to the undeserving. You are he whom your brothers shall praise, alliance. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. Each of these refer to the ruling position Judah will have among his brethren. He inherited the leadership aspect of the firstborn's inheritance. The leadership position among his brothers meant that the eventual kings of Israel would come from Judah, and that the Messiah, God's ultimate leader, would eventually come from the tribe of Judah. Until Shiloh comes. The leadership prophecy took some 640 years to fulfill, in part, with the reign of David, first of Judah's dynasty of kings. The prophecy took some 1,600 years to completely fulfill in Jesus. Jesus is referred to as Shiloh, the name meaning he whose right it is, or to whom it belongs, and a title anciently understood to speak of the Messiah. Interesting. From David until the Herods, a prince of Judah was head over Israel, even Daniel in captivity. The promise was that Israel would keep this scepter until Shiloh comes. Even under the foreign masters during this period, Israel had a limited right to self-rule. Until AD 7, at that time, under Herod and the Romans, their right to capital punishment, a small but remaining element of their self-governance, was taken away. At the time, the rabbis considered it a disaster of unfulfilled scripture. Seemingly, the last vestige of the scepter had passed from Judah, and they did not see the Messiah. Reportedly, rabbis walked the streets of Jerusalem and said, "Woe unto us, for the scepter has been taken away from Judah, and Shiloh has not come." Yet God's word has not been broken. Certainly Jesus was alive then. Perhaps this was the very year he was 12 years old and discussed God's word in the temple with the scholars of his day. Dan shall be a serpent by the way. Dan was a troublesome tribe. They introduced idolatry into Israel. Jeroboam set up one of his idolatrous golden calves in Dan, and later Dan became a center of idol worship. Dan is left out of the listing of tribes regarding the 144,000 in Revelation 7, 5-8, but Dan is the first tribe listed in Ezekiel's millennial roll call of the tribes. This is a remarkable sign of God's redemption. Interesting. Didn't realize that. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. The Hebrew word for salvation is Yeshua. At this point in the prophecy, when Jacob was near death, he called out for God's salvation. Knowingly or not, Jacob called out for Jesus. Naphtali. Naphtali is a deer let loose. He uses beautiful words. Naphtali's land was in a key portion near the Sea of Galilee, the region where Jesus did much of his teaching and ministry. He uses beautiful words. Because so much of the ministry of Jesus took place in the region of Naphtali, this was fittingly said of him. Joseph is a fruitful bough. This was both a description of Joseph's life and a personal blessing concerning his descendants. In a sense, Joseph's tribes were already blessed when his sons received their blessing in Genesis 48. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors. Jacob could say this because he was, for much of his life, a scoundrel. Now at the end of his days, he saw just how good God was to him. He was forgiven much and loved much. Yeah. Benjamin, a ravenous wolf. This was the tribe with a reputation for fierceness. To see the great extent of this, that is, he shall devour the prey, Look at Ehud in Judges, Saul, and Paul. The cruelty of the tribe in general is seen in Judges 19 and 20. Yeah. I am to be gathered to my people. Jacob was confident that his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham continued to live in the eternal state, and that he would be gathered to them. Bury me in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah. Egypt was filled with magnificent tombs, and because of the respect that Jacob had, he could have been buried like a pharaoh. But he wanted to be buried in an obscure cave in Canaan, because Canaan was the land of the promise. And he was gathered to his people. There are said to be three basic attitudes towards death. Among the ancient Greeks, they held to what can be called the death-accepting view. Our modern world is sold out to a death-denying approach. The biblical approach is the death-defying attitude. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.